are you guys facing similar issues in Canada? What is the regulatory landscape like there for you?
Right now, there's new limits that were put in place in terms of how much you can actually buy, how much crypto you can buy in a given year. So
What? Hey, Narb, welcome to the What Kind of Internet Do You Want podcast. So glad you could be here.
my pleasure, Amy. Thank you so much for having me. I know we had a bit of a struggle getting to this point, but I'm glad we finally got to meet face to face.
Yeah, thank you so much for working with us on the scheduling. Yeah, excited to have you on. So, to get things started, could you please give us just a brief background on who you are and what you do, and also what you do in Web3 in particular?
For sure. Yeah, so my name is Narb Shahnazarian. I go by Narb for short. So during the day, I'm a software developer at Expedia. Been there almost 7 years now. But after all that fun is done during the day, during the evening times, I am mostly focusing on Web3 things and a bit of philanthropy as well on the side. So what I'm most well known for in the Web3 space is being part of the developer DAO. Basically, it's a DAO for developers to build cool things in the public in Web3. And I've done a variety of different things in that space, and it kind of led up to me creating a weekly podcast, much like this, but it's for developers to basically showcase what they've been building. Could be a nice weekend project they've been building, a company they've just spun up, what have you. But that series is called Dev-N-Tell. So those are held every Friday for 30 minutes worth around 8:30 a.m. PST, 3:30 p.m. UTC. And as well, kind of out of that and being part of the Developer DAO community, I started my own not-for-profit called the Glosseta Foundation. And kind of how that came to be first was I joined the DAO and I saw a lot of folks were building cool things. I wanted to get my feet in the game as well. At that point, I had not really been part of any type of open source project or anything like that. So I said, okay, what the heck? I'm here. Developer DAO is all open source. Let's do it. And then I ended up creating my own Web3 glossary called Glosseta, kind of a mishmash of glossary and meta together. But basically, that was born out of the necessity that I saw of a lot of Web3 jargon getting put out there on Twitter and whatnot. And even myself, when I first started, I saw a lot of people saying GM to each other. I'm like, oh, why are so many people interested in General Motors? But in fact, it was just people saying good morning to each other. So so out of that, Glosseta was kind of born. And what sets Glosseta apart from other glossaries, other than being Web3 specific, is that all of its data is actually stored permanently on the Arweave protocol.
Oh, very cool.
So yeah. So even if Glosseta gets taken down for whatever reason, all that data is still there and still can be accessed. And kind of from that, I decided to start a not-for-profit around it, and with the intent being to educate the non-technical person around Web3. Because as we all know, a lot of the documentation and content out there around Web3 is either very developer specific or
Hmm.
it's misconstrued in a lot of false information or misinformation from
Hmm.
mainstream media, celebrities, and whatnot. And it's the bane of my existence, so to speak, because every time I go to talk about Web3 to friends or colleagues, there's always the negative connotations that are brought forth, and that it's just frustrating for all of us to have to continuously defend this bit of innovation where not a lot of other similar innovations get critiqued. So yeah,
I can
it's
certainly
quite a
empathize
bit.
with that. I mean, that's essentially one of the reasons that the Web3 Working Group was created. Was we're specifically focused on Web3 infrastructure because infrastructure projects have kind of haven't gotten the attention that they deserve, I would say, when compared to the
Right.
financial services aspects of the industry. But we all have to contend with that kind of magic internet money,
Yeah. Yes.
and all of the attention that the scams get in the news and that kind of thing. And it really is unfortunate that that's the reputation that it has, and yet also, it's not surprising. A lot of times, new technologies and that kind of initial adoption curve are dealing with um, bad actors using them to make a quick buck and having to deal with kind of the negative fallout of that as people, attempt to adopt it, or as we try to encourage people to adopt the new technology. Yeah, that makes sense. So we're definitely aligned on what you're doing with
Yes.
Glosseta and what we're doing here at Web3 Working Group. That's very cool. I did you also mention your work at StoreDat, or are you not working on that as
Yeah.
much anymore?
Yes. So, StoreDat is also a part of the Glosseta Foundation portfolio. And basically, what that is you can think of it as a software as a service, basically an API to allow people to utilize Web3 storage in a more easier fashion. So right now, a lot of the different decentralized file storage protocols, they all kind of have their own way of working, whether it's Filecoin or Arweave or StorageJ or what have you. And basically, the way to interact, read, and write with those protocols is very different between one to
Hmm.
the other. And one of the big things that I'm really excited about in the Web3 space is decentralized storage, which is why I kind of like push my focus this way. And out of all of those issues that I mentioned, as well as the fact that like Web3 accounts and whatnot are very difficult to work with the average person, where you have to pay storage fees and you have to keep your own keys safe and all that jazz. I was like, oh, there must be an easier way to do this. And essentially that's how StoreDat was born. I created a single API which allows users to basically create an API key and get up and running with any, well, at this moment, Arweave or Filecoin, decentralized storage protocol with a single language, basically, to access them both, to read and write.
That's really cool. What I particularly liked about that project is that uh, it's very from the perspective of a Web2 developer, right? It's like creating that
Yeah,
bridge between like what Web2 developers need in order to use Web3. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit more about your work with kind of Web2, because you're for all that you're doing in Web3, you're sort of surprisingly new to this space. I think I read that you only kind of got into it in 2021. Is that
that's right.
right? What I saw?
That's right. That's
Wow.
right. Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yes.
amazing how much you've done in such a short amount of time. Yeah,
It's like
okay.
dog years, right? In Web3. At least what I've heard.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that's right. Okay, so you work as a Web2 developer at Expedia during the
Mhm.
day, and then you hack clearly extensively at night and on the weekends, building all kinds
Yeah.
of cool stuff. What what is it that attracted you to Web3?
Yeah.
Was it reading the Bitcoin white paper? Was there some sort of aha moment? What was it?
Yeah, great question. So I found out about block or Bitcoin and Ethereum back in 2014, but I didn't really pay too much attention to it. I said, "Oh, that's interesting," but never really went down the rabbit hole. And
Mhm.
then when we got to the COVID times where everybody locked down, obviously everybody had a bit more time on their hands. And then I was like,
Mm.
okay, I'm going to stop procrastinating and actually like dive in a bit. And as most people do, I started with the Bitcoin white paper, and I was like, oh wow, this is pretty neat. And then I shifted over to the Ethereum white paper. I was like, oh wow, this is awesome. and
Okay.
then, and then kind of from that, I started to play around, building my own POCs. I was developing smart contracts, made a token like everyone does, started playing with Chainlink oracles, and then eventually, and this was all happening in 2021. And
Mhm.
then eventually, the NFT craze came about,
Mhm.
and I wanted a piece of the action, but all the things were like way overpriced, and it was like silly.
Mhm.
And then I found this tweet by Nader Dabit, actually one of the founders of Developer DAO, who was like, "Oh, I made this DAO. All you need to do to join is claim this NFT," which he was giving away for free. All you had to pay was the gas cost. So basically, I bought one of those, and then it really all took off from there. Um, and yeah,
Okay.
like you mentioned,
Okay.
it was yeah, a
Yeah.
short time, but done quite a bit. in that short
Yeah,
time.
yeah, you have. So what would you say your sort of vision is for Web3? You know, like what do you think Web3 might look
Yeah,
like in 5 or 10 years, and how will all of our experiences of the digital world be changed by it?
great question. Yeah, so I think at this point in time, a lot of the news and whatnot you hear is very technical. I think like maybe three, or well, maybe not three, but like let's say 5 years down the line, I think we'll start seeing way more prominent applications being built on Web3 technology, but not mentioning that they are Web3. So
Mhm.
the biggest ones I kind of foresee are social apps, um, file storage, of course, and just the different ways that enterprises can start utilizing this technology. Because a lot of them at this point are heavy AWS users or Azure users or whatnot, and they don't realize that a lot of the infrastructure that Web3 brings about, there's the Bitcoin protocol, Ethereum, Arweave, whoever, all of this is actually public and open source software that is maintained by many, many different people around the globe. So as long as we continue to kind of decentralize this technology, ensure that it's not all hosted on Amazon or whatnot, I think that's when we'll really start to see the adoption of this technology more broadly. I mean, you see it right now where a lot of firms like Starbucks and Nike, they're dabbling their toes in it, experimenting. But my vision for Web3 is to get to a point where you think of it just like like you see a company in the same kind of limelight you see in them now, where you see an awesome experience that you want to get into, but you don't really want to deal with creating a wallet or keeping track of your private keys and whatnot. You
Mhm.
want you want that experience to kind of be melded into the the app or experience you're going with there. So TLDR, as soon as the
Mhm.
user experience kind of kind of fixes itself, or we get to a point where the user doesn't understand they're using Web3, I think is kind of where we'll see this next wave of digital
Mass
innovation.
onboarding. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. It has to just be obscured into the background to the point where it's as frictionless as using Web 2 for sure. But
yeah,
offering some sort of new functionality or something like that, which is why the platforms themselves will integrate it, at to begin with. So I've thought about how or why rather it would be important for, let's say, music distribution or content distribution kind of platforms to integrate Web3. And I've thought about it for, and so like one of those things is like, yes, they spend a lot of money on something like Amazon Web Services for sure to distribute their content. However, in the grand context of their budgets, that line item is actually very small compared to what they're spending on marketing or what they're spending on
hmm
uh, generating the content or acquiring the content. And so it's maybe not as appealing to them as maybe some sort of functionality that the tech
yeah,
stack could offer that would maybe give them better control over the distribution, more protection against privacy. I mean, sorry, against piracy,
yes,
those kinds of issues, right? Because if you can prevent something from becoming uh, available on the high seas, you can really increase revenues of new releases, that kind of thing. But
right.
I haven't spent really any time thinking about how or what the feature set would be for something like a travel platform like Expedia. Do you have a sense of what the functionality that Web3 offers would be? Because it also makes sense for something like, let's say, Starbucks, right? They're really interested
Mhm.
in maybe customer loyalty, which is why NFTs would make sense for them to get started there to offer kind of, those kinds of programs. Would that be the same in a travel platform situation, or would there be different functionality to look at?
I think the biggest thing, at least the easiest thing in reach, is kind of enhancing loyalty programs with Web3. So
Okay.
every platform has their own loyalty program, and Expedia recently launched their initiative called One Key, which basically aggregates all the different loyalty programs that they had across all their portfolio into one single account. But the way I see it is kind of at least succeeding in the short term is the way Starbucks did it, where they didn't really touch their loyalty program, their existing loyalty program. They added a layer on top of it, which is actually pretty cool in the way it's the net effects have taken over there, where basically they have created a marketplace for people to be able to collect digital collectibles and redeem those collectibles for in real life experiences. But essentially, the biggest one that I see is kind of that marketplace, that those new marketplaces that kind of can pop up out of thin air, so to speak. So in travel, I would say one of the more interesting things to that I would hope would come onto the Web3 stack is a supply. So that's basically like having a centralized,
Mm-hmm.
but
Like a
a single
clearinghouse or
place,
something.
yeah, clearing cows
Mm-hmm.
for just the like flights or cruises or hotel inventory, where for example, you can have a hotel have their rooms available as NFTs and people can rent those and sell them if they can't make part of their trip, for example. So say you book a 5 day trip at a Hilton or something, and then you're like, oh, I can only stay 3 of those 5 days, and and the 2 days aren't refundable. So
Mm-hmm.
in today's world, you don't get your money back, but in an NFT marketplace, potentially you can sell those 2 days to somebody else who wants to take them over. So
Yeah, that would be
those
awesome.
kinds of
Yeah.
things, I think will be interesting in the travel space for sure.
Yeah, it could give a whole new wave of travel deals. I remember when travel sites were just beginning to get on the web, there were just and flights in particular, there were crazy deals that we could get back in the day. That's changed a lot. Most of us book our travel online now, so it's really just average
Yeah,
pricing for the most part. You don't get those kind of crazy steals like you used to get. So that could be really fun, actually. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Cool. Okay, well, let's dive into some of the Web3 projects that you're working on. Do you want to talk about StoreDat, Glosseta? What do you want to talk about first? Dev-N-Tell. I love the name of that, by the way. So cute.
Oh, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, we can. I guess we can start with the Glosseta because it's a little bit more user friendly in terms of being more approachable for the non-technical person. So essentially, what I'm looking to do with that is to turn it into a more broader educational platform. So you can think of the glossary that exists on glossary.com today, but an expanded feature set where you have these introductory content posts about like what a wallet is, why you should care about having a wallet, what is Web3, what is cryptocurrency. And we've actually started a new initiative where every week we're kind of doing a broad concept overview. So those
Oh,
posts
cool.
happen on Mondays. They introduce a new concept. Wednesday, you get a spotlight of a company that's applying that concept, and then Friday, you get a in real life scenario of how you can be using that technology or that concept. So last week we did cryptocurrency, and this week is digital identity. So you can follow the Glosseta Twitter account, Instagram account, and TikTok account to get access to that content. Eventually, that will be brought forward onto the glosseta.com website as well, but we're testing it out on socials to see how that kind of sticks. And then,
Cool. So
yeah,
why did you feel like you needed to supplement the content that's already out there as explainers? I think some of the larger sites have explainers about
yeah,
glossaries, that kind of thing. What's different about Glossetta?
yeah. So our aim is really to kind of make it more accessible for the average person. So a lot of today's glossary content, if you go look at a Web3 protocol, it's still very much oriented towards a technical person. And obviously, uh, I don't think my mother or father would really care to learn about what what a block is or what a hash is. they're more interested in, oh, what's cryptocurrency? What is Web3? What are these very broad, high level topics? And I think there are a lot of good initiatives like your working group that are trying to push people past this hurdle. But I think the more of it that we can kind of bring afoot to people in a more digestible manner, I think it's better. And I mean, the more, like I said, the more content that's out there, the better.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Okay, great. So are there people that are using Glosseta, or are they contributing to it, or how is that working out? What successes have you seen so far?
Yeah, so we are seeing ever since we started this new content series, we have seen more viewership of that content, as well as a brief spike in visits to glosseta.com. But I
Awesome.
think there's still some more work to be done yet to make it even better, even more accessible. Just
Mhm.
because the average person who wants to get started with it doesn't really know where to start. So that's one of the big things why we started this concept called the word of the day. So that's been going on for like a year or more. But basically, every day you find a new definition of a word on the site and post it on socials as well. Uh, but the main thing for us at the moment is to provide more content for people, and hopefully that drives more engagement onto the platform, as
That
well
makes
as
sense.
us working on revamping the site to make it look a bit nicer.
So once people look at Glosseta and they get, you convince them. They say Web3, cool. What next step do you recommend somebody do? Like, is there some sort of action that a mainstream user would take, in your opinion, that would be the right first step or the best first step for them to have a good experience?
Yeah, I would say you probably would want to go towards a more well-known company, someone like a Coinbase, for example, to start your Web3 experience, just because they're also working on making it more accessible for the everyday person to start. I think the most common place for a lot of people to start in Web3, if you're not a technical person, is the speculation side of things, or just starting to make a wallet. I think that
Hmm.
um, I think just familiarizing oneself with the concept of a wallet and knowing the difference between a self-custodial and a non-self-custodial one, I think is a huge first step. That would be what I recommend somebody kind of start with, and then you
That
can,
makes sense.
and then
And
obviously
Coinbase is
you
a good
can,
recommendation
yeah,
because they have Coinbase Wallet, so
yeah,
you can get on in the custodial
exactly,
fashion and then move to a non-custodial pretty easily. That's a great idea. Hmm.
exactly, yeah, yeah. It's just
And
like you
then,
need that baby
sorry,
step
I cut you
first.
off there. Yeah, exactly.
No worries.
And then what would be next?
And then it's really up to the person. Um,
Mm,
for a lot of folks, that's probably as far as they'll go until we have more easily accessible apps. I think once we solve the user experience problem, I think the logical next step for an average person will be exploring Web3 social. I think that
mhm.
that has a lot of potential to take off, especially now given all the turmoil of today's social media platforms. I mean, you saw Instagram kind of trying to roll out a semi decentralized version of a social app called their Threads platform. It's not
Threads.
decentralized yet, but they did say that they have plans to do so. We'll see where that goes, but yeah, I would say the next logical step would be to start exploring Web3 social, maybe Web3 music. Um, I know Snoop Dogg has a lot of hits on OpenSea. If you want to explore that, I think that would be interesting kind of first dive into NFTs. But yeah, that's kind of where I see for the non-technical person. And obviously, if you're technical, you would deep dive right into the Bitcoin white papers, Ethereum white papers, and kind of be on your way, like most of us do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Getting into that for the more technical people, and the StoreDat, uh,
yeah.
is it an app? What would you call it?
It's an
Uh,
API, I guess.
It's an API. Okay. So are there
Yeah.
APIs, I mean, sorry, are there apps or dApps that are built with it? Or would there be a kind of ideal app or dApp that you would see being built on it?
Yeah. So as of right now, the actually Glosseta itself is a consumer of the StoreDat API, reading the glossary data from that. And then my other non Web3 venture that I co-founded with a friend of mine called Good People Click is also going to be running on that same API as well. But as of yet, no other big names have come forward, or at least I know of, are using it. But it'd be awesome if people were interested to try it out. It's free to sign up. All you go and do is put your name on a form, and then I'll go and give you a API key basically, and you're up and running for free.
Very cool. Okay. And so any kind of app could use it, or are there specific ones that would make the most sense? Or it seems like probably
I
things that are storing content would make sense if it's intended for decentralized file storage, but
Exactly. So today, we have the support to upload text files and JSON formatted data as well. So basically, anything that has a JSON formatted kind of record system could theoretically use that. Obviously, you have to be cautious because the data that gets stored is permanent. So you don't want to be storing sensitive information, for example, or things that eventually need to be deleted. Um, we are working on adding encryption so that things that are uploaded can only be accessed by you. But that feature is not there yet. So anything that can be made available publicly can go through StoreDat at the moment. So maybe something like a like historical content. If you want to store historical records of something on the
cool.
web, you can do so
Hmm.
with that. And my I'm very interested to see if there's any potential there to be for StoreDat to be used to power a social platform as well, because theoretically you can store that data there as well. But yeah, I would say those two are probably the main use cases at the moment. And if you want to use Arweave or Filecoin for a hackathon, there's no easier way to get set up than using StoreDat. Even though we're not officially affiliated with them, you're still technically using those underlying protocols.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And
yeah,
I think from what I understand, you're subsidizing the publishing cost to Arweave. So do you have limits on how much can be uploaded in order to mitigate the
yeah.
costs for you? Yeah.
Yeah, so there are rate limits set right now for both the reads and the writes. I forget what they are exactly, but since the content that you upload through those two file formats are relatively small, the costs for that aren't huge. But yes, like you
Okay.
mentioned, the everything is basically covered by the Glosseta Foundation at this point, just to make it super easy and accessible for people to be able to access it.
I love that. I think that's so important when we're at this phase because people are so not accustomed to spending money to
Yeah,
access things. So much of the internet has been free. And so it's a hurdle for sure when you put up some sort of, when you interject the friction of having to pay money, it can cause some problems. What made you
exactly.
decide to start with Filecoin and Arweave rather than Saya or Storj or any of the other file storage?
Great question. So Arweave, I chose Arweave just because of the work I did on Glosseta with that. So I already had a pretty good knowledge base with that. Filecoin, I have a couple of friends at Filecoin, DevRels, that I met in real life, and then yeah, basically they sold me on it, so I integrated that as well. And yeah, and it was all a learning process as well, right? So I knew a lot
Mhm.
about RE, but I didn't really know about Filecoin. So I said I'd kill two birds with one stone.
Cool. Yeah.
And
I mean,
Ghost, Yeah.
It makes sense as an outsider looking in because Arweave has the unique characteristic of offering permanent storage. None of the other networks do that. And then, of course, Filecoin is biggest by a lot. So
Yeah.
that definitely makes sense there. When you were working with the two of them, I'm particularly interested in standardization
Hmm.
from
Hmm.
the previous work that I've done in the industry. So, I feel like we claim that Web3 will offer us all of this interoperability, but that unfortunately, right now, especially because so much of it has been, mm, mm, so much of the excitement has been driven by the financialization of it and the excitement over, quickly
Yeah.
growing token value, that people are like, well, I only want to build something if I can tokenize it and that kind of thing, rather than looking at let's call them layer two, even though the layer
Yeah.
conversation is a whole other thing. Layer
Yeah.
two sort of standards that would allow different protocols to work together. Were there any standard type questions or issues that stood out to you when you were working with Arweave and IPFS? Like, were there things that you would say, like, oh, if we could just come to consensus about how we managed this or how we, dealt with that, it would make a huge difference for developers?
Yeah. The biggest gripe that I had was just the fact that you had to read and write data in such a different way on both sides. I mean, they both have their own JavaScript SDKs, but for example, Arweave has a GraphQL API, but Filecoin doesn't. And then the way that data was uploaded or the data was represented kind of differed as well. So as a developer, I was like, oh, if I want to store some information on Arweave and then store some other information on Filecoin, I have to make two integrations to do that. And if I wanted
Mm-hmm.
a third, I had to do a third. So I said, what's the point of this? Why we're all just storing things permanently, basically. So why not just have a single layer to basically be able to have everybody speak the same language to be
Mm-hmm.
able to read and write data, right? Because in
Mm-hmm.
the end, we are just storing text, we are just storing JSON, we are just storing images and videos and whatnot. So I think it in my head it just made too much sense not to have a single represented way to do that. And yeah, and to your earlier point about everything having a token, that is also a tangent conversation we can have. I will say this now: not everything needs a token. So stop
Agreed.
making random
Wholeheartedly agreed.
tokens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wholeheartedly agreed. I think that hopefully the cultural conversation around this will shift, and hopefully the investment capital will become educated about the kinds of business models that make sense on Web3 that aren't just token based, because when they're just so focused on those and all of the money is flowing into those, we're in danger of building a new walled garden, right? Where like
Yeah.
everything is siloed, and what was the point? What is the point of
Yeah.
switching to
Exactly.
Web3 if that's where we end up
Exactly.
again, right? Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
all right. So I know Good People Click is not a Web3 project, but I would love to hear a little bit more about it. It sounds really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So essentially, what Good People Click is it allows you to basically donate to charities while you shop online at no extra cost to you. And
That's cool.
how that works is through the magic of affiliate marketing. So basically, when you want to start shopping online, you visit goodpeopleclick.com first, and then you click on the shop button, and then you're presented with a list of affiliated partners. And then it's sparse at the moment, but the aim is to have it more full in the coming months. But essentially, what happens is you click on one of those buttons and you shop as you do normally. And then, as long as you shop within 24 hours and that item comes to you, we get a cut of commission from that partner. And then what we do is we donate 50% of our revenue made from all those commissions to a charity of our choosing. And and Good People Click was really made to help the average person who was kind of on the fence between donating and not donating. to kind of just like ease that process for them. Like you don't have to think about it. All you do is click a button in your shop and it's all taken care of for you in the background. So, and no, at no extra cost to you. So, you know, how you go to the grocery store, sometimes you do your shopping and they're like, oh, do you want to donate,
Mm-hmm.
this much to this charity? So you have to actually pay extra on top of whatever you pay for your groceries to donate that. Um, but in this system, you don't pay anything extra. We pay out of our own pockets.
Yeah, that's
So a
cool.
bit of
It's a really
philanthropy on the side.
Yeah, it's a cool
Yeah.
way to use affiliate marketing, really. It's a
Yeah.
philanthropic use of affiliate marketing. It's smart. I like that. Do you have Who are some of the partners that you can shop with right now?
Yeah. So
Amazon?
today, yes. Amazon is one, Walmart is another. But like
Well,
I
those are
mentioned, we're looking
two
to,
huge platforms.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we aimed for simplicity, because everybody shops with Amazon. So Amazon was the logical first partner to see whether or not this concept would stick. A lot of people are, from feedback that we've gotten, are quite interested. But the key challenge right now is having people remember to go to goodpeopleclick.com. So to overcome
Hmm.
that challenge, a lot of folks have said, build us a Chrome extension. Like, okay, we'll do that for you. So
Oh,
we're going to be
yeah.
working on that in the upcoming months.
That's a great idea.
So
And and so the user doesn't even choose which charity it goes to. You guys are deciding that. So what is your
yeah.
process for deciding where you're going to point the funds?
Yeah, so whatever charity that we do choose has to fall under the UN 17 guidelines, basically for a charity. Uh, and we take care to research the charities that we donate to quite thoroughly because, as you know, another big problem with donations today is you don't really know where your money is going.
Mhm.
Sure, you can donate, but does it actually end up to the person that it's supposed to help?
Yep.
So one of the bigger charities that we have been donating to the last couple of months through Good People Click is Charity Water, which basically looks to give clean drinking water to those who don't have access to it. So
Oh, that's
uh,
wonderful.
when we first started, we were able to donate $20 to Charity Water. This was the first month of us being alive, and then
Mhm.
that money went to giving, I believe it was 7 people clean drinking water for a month, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. $20 for clean drinking water for a
Yeah,
month. That's quite the
that's
impact.
incredible.
So,
Wow.
so you can imagine if that scales, like how much more clean drinking water people can have access to, right? And to the end user who's using the people click, you're not really doing anything other than just shopping like you are today, but you're making a broader impact when you do. So that's the end goal is looking to kind of really scale this out and broaden the impact that we can make. But we're still kind of young. I think we're only 2 or 3 months old. So still in the early stages, but really excited for this project as well.
Yeah, that sounds like you could have an incredibly meaningful impact. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah,
So I believe you're based in Canada. Is that right?
that's right.
Yeah.
Out of
So
Vancouver,
here
British
Okay,
Columbia.
so here in the US, we're facing, I'm sure a lot of regulatory uncertainty when it comes to crypto and Web3. And it's really causing a lot of strife, frankly, for the industry. And it's holding it back. I think there's a tremendous amount of pressure that's being held back, that there's and it's really frankly having a negative impact on who you see building companies, because there's a lot
Mhm.
of people who are maybe taking advantage of the regulatory uncertainty in order to essentially harm people and make a quick buck. um,
Yeah.
and then there's also obviously those of us who just believe, so wholeheartedly in how important this technology is, that we're willing to take that risk. But then you're seeing regulation through enforcement, and that's just very, very scary. And entrepreneurship is difficult enough.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, are you guys facing similar issues in Canada? What is the regulatory landscape like there for you?
Usually, Canada follows the US very closely in terms of whatever they do. Right now, the biggest things are currently centered around like what cryptocurrency falls under in terms of whether it's a commodity or
A
whatnot.
security,
Right
just
now,
like it is
yeah,
here.
security, yeah, just
Mhm.
like it is there. And then there's new limits that were put in place in terms of how much you can actually buy, how much crypto you can buy in a given year. So
What?
yeah, I forget the number, but there
Wow.
was there was a limit they put in. But yeah, it's basically almost the same like you're facing in the States. But Vancouver actually is quite a hotbed for a lot of Web3 companies. I know Dapper Labs is here, Layer Zero is here, Covalent is here, as well as a lot of others. But yeah, the landscape is very much the same. It's very hard to start up a Web3 company without
Hmm.
having to go through all these different loopholes and whatnot. A lot of time, um, what at least from what I've seen, people start their Web3 company as a not-for-profit, either out of the Cayman Islands or wherever, and then that is kind of like the Web3 entity that has like the token and all of that stuff there, and then there's another for-profit arm that does like the actual software
Hmm.
business behind that, which is kind of strange. It's like we're we're basically building software. It's just it works differently than it does today. So if people don't actually realize, people in charge don't realize that they have to do the work to kind of understand the difference between what Web3 is bringing versus the technology we're using today. So, and that's one of the aims that I'm trying to solve, and I'm sure you're trying to solve as well, right? Just like this is what it is. Like, don't listen to don't listen to a celebrity XYZ who's telling you what it is.
Right, right.
Right?
Making sure
Yeah,
that they're getting technically accurate information that's also easy
yeah,
to understand. It's a difficult combo, but it's really important
it
work.
is
Yeah.
100%.
Um, okay, great. Well, is there anything else that you want to talk about in the podcast before we wrap up?
Uh, Nothing comes to mind. I think we covered quite a bit. Just want to say if you are watching this and are interested in learning about Web3, check out the Web3 Working Group, check out Glosseta Foundation. Both platforms have great content for your learning needs. You can follow Glosseta on Instagram, Glosseta_foundation. Same handle on TikTok. On Twitter, we're glosseta.com. And StoreDat, if you're interested in trying out StoreDat, visit storedat.io and then sign up. It's completely free to use at this point in time. And uh, looking to push Web3 forward here.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I just have one final question that we always ask people because it's the name of the podcast, which is what
Yeah.
kind of internet do you want?
Yes, that's a great question. I guess the internet that I'd want is something that's more free of today's close vice grips on all your user information. So a big thing for me, a big pain for me, is having to create a account on every single thing that I want to use, and basically that gave birth to all the password managers out there. But what I think at least Web3 can solve, adding a digital identity system to it. So if I can just log into a given website with my wallet, I don't really have to create another account again. So if we can get to a point where more and more um, companies start to adopt Web3 identity as one of their identity solutions, at least to start, I think that would make for a better internet experience. At least that's the thing, the top thing that comes to mind at this point. I'm sure there's other
That
things, but yeah,
I completely
yeah,
agree. That totally makes sense. And I will just use this as an opportunity to plug for anybody that is working on decentralized ID to check out the W3C's standard that they're working on for this, because it's important, as we were talking about earlier, that we all adopt a basic set of standards as a framework so that we can have that interoperability. So if you're working on a protocol like that, definitely consider conforming to that standard. All right. Well, that's it
awesome.
for today. Thank you so much for the chat. I really appreciated it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
See ya.
Cheers.